And now a message from our friends at Fetching Food.
The 1970s and 80s had Elbow, Gravy Train, Purina, Meow Mix, and Bell Bottoms. You've changed your clothes, now change how you feed your pet. Like Bell Bottoms, kick the kibble and join us in the 21st century with the healthiest diet for dogs and cats. Feed naturally, feed raw, feed Fetching Foods.
Groomer Next Door podcast.
No, it's just baffling to me. Why is it so impossible to put together a decent run-through? You people have had hours and hours to prepare. It's just so confusing to me. Why is no one ready?
Hello, pups and kittens, and welcome to another fun-filled and action-packed edition of the Groomer Next Door podcast. I'm your host, Chris Green, and for the very first time ever, we're going to have the same guest that we had on last week on this week, and there's a great reason. So this past week, we got to see some of the FDA at its greatest, and as you can hear, the dogs are in the background squeaking their toys. There was a false claim of a recall with Answers Pet Food, which wasn't a recall. It was a warning letter. And we're going to dive into everything that went on, and we're going to cover Salmonella because that seems to be the hot button that they're trying to push and scare everybody. It's a scare tactic, as we will go over. And we're going to just dissect all of it. Dr. Coger is an amazing scientist, as we all very well know, and doctor, because, well, you've got to be a scientist to be a doctor. And she's going to really lay it out there for us. If for some reason, Mr. Thompson from Results Radio is listening, hello. It was great being able to see you over at the event tonight. And I hope you are listening to this episode because this is the pinnacle of why the podcast is a great reason why it needs to be a radio show. We can make this a radio show that's going to be local. And we'll have local people right here in our community join us. And hopefully, and I say hopefully, be able to grow it so it can be syndicated and we can bring it to a lot of people in a lot of different markets. Well, by that sound, Dr. Coger is about to enter the podcast studio. I really appreciate her doing this again. She is amazing, and this is volume 8 of Dr. Coger on the podcast. 8 times. I mean, we were shocked when we were talking before this. So with that said, welcome Dr. Coger back to the podcast.
Oh, hello. Hold on a sec. Dad, we have a guest on the podcast.
Well, for the very first time in the Groomer Next Door podcast history, after 250-something episodes, we are going to have the same guest join us. And I'm just going to say, I'm the guest, the one that I'm going to introduce, because I feel like maybe that's kind of where I should be. I'm thinking it was Johnny Carson, and I can't remember his name. He was his kind of fluffer guy. That's who I should be. Ed McMahon. That's it. That's what I'm going to be. So coming out again is our very good friend and resident brilliant mind, Dr. Coger. Thank you for again coming out and doing this podcast.
Oh, you're very welcome. I can't believe this is the 8th time.
Right, and I digressed as I was introing you in. I'm digressing into another world again. I do this so often. It's almost like a professional thing that I do. Well, we're going to cover the incidents that's happened this week. Started out on Monday, where the FDA put out this BS kind of witch hunt against Answers Pet Food. And we're going to break it down and try to do it in a way that you guys can all understand because, honestly, it's a lot to digest. So,
pun intended.
I wasn't trying for that. I did not try. Now, I'll say this. I was literally moments away from recording with Billy at the time, and then he goes, uh-oh, something's come up. I got to go, which is odd. And, of course, then everything transpired. You and I spoke Oh my gosh, it was that same day? I want to say we were going back and
might
forth.
have been, yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was. And
Yeah.
and you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to change everything. We, obviously we have to do something about this. And you're right,
That's
we
for
did.
sure. We
So
do.
I know you've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of people. And at the end of the day, the best way of breaking it down is we need somebody who understands the science. Well, I don't, because I'm not a doctor. I just play one on a podcast. So the recall stated, I love this. It's such a funny one. It stated that it was a public health risk for A+ Answers straight beef formula for dogs due to Salmonella out of Nebraska. Really?
Correct. One sample.
One sample.
I think they tested several packages, if you will, and one of them tested positive for Salmonella. These tests were done by Nebraska. And the other samples tested negative. The samples that Nebraska provided answers to test independently all tested negative. And I think it's important to be absolutely crystal clear about this. No product was recalled. The FDA issued a warning letter, but Answers did not recall the product because of the conflicting negative tests that indicated the product was safe. They did stop the distributors from selling the product at this point, but it's my understanding that the product is still sitting there, and as their tests have been done, everything's been clean. The assumption is that that package that Nebraska tested positive may have been contaminated. It may have not been handled properly, which would mean it would be frozen until it was thawed per Answers instructions to be served then to your dog. You can't condemn a food if somebody takes a frozen product and sticks it in a hot car or lets it sit out when it shouldn't, or the package was pierced, things like that. And we just don't know about those things.
And we've had this discussion about different testing that's gone on. Obviously, the Rad Cat situation was a big one. I remember
huge.
It was massive. And I remember saying, now who's next? This was not who I thought.
No, because, and let me disclose, I do not at this moment in time, and haven't for some time, actually fed Answers. I'm not on their payroll. I think it's an excellent product. I choose to do a DIY sort of feeding for my dogs. I would not hesitate to feed my dog Answers.
Right.
And I think there are many advantages to their fermentation process. I have used their goat's milk with puppies 3 years ago. So I'm not getting anything from this conversation financially or product or anything like that.
And I'm the same way. I'm not receiving anything, including even neither one of us, whether it's financial or even sample. We're not receiving anything from this. This is really a dissection of what's going on and breaking it down. Because again, I'm a DIY, but if I was going to go through, I would definitely, they have a great product. And this is the only part that we both had in our conversation on Monday was this isn't to affect Answers. This is to affect the market and to really stop people from
our segment of the market.
Yes.
And Answers takes a very scientific approach to producing their product, improving their product internally. There are other raw companies out there that are far less precise and reputable. And, there are people grinding it up out in the back kind of thing, and you don't know what's in it. They know what's in their food. They did that beautiful video, the Talk to Us campaign, where they took you to the farm. And as my understanding was, the cameras were welcome anywhere. And what company does that with their product and their potentially proprietary info?
Very few.
I was very impressed by that.
I was too. I mean, I do know that the thing is that the only difference between you and I on this is that you actually have sat down with Billy. You've been to AFCO meetings. You actually have had one-on-one with them, where my limitation is through the podcast. So I haven't had the luxury of having a one-on-one. Plus, you guys spoke together in New Jersey.
Yes, we did. And in case anybody doesn't recall, the Billy we're speaking of is Billy Hookman, who is Answer's nutrition science director. Double check me on his exact title. But he's the science guy. Mm-hmm. And he travels all over speaking about Answers. He's based in California. And he's just a wealth of knowledge.
Mm-hmm. He is. And what's funny, and it kind of has become a running thing, is when we talk about movies and different things, it really all stems back to him being on a podcast and him and I going on a complete different direction, very rare, talking about a Marvel movie and discussing Marvel versus DC. That's really who Billy Hookman is. He's very versed when it comes to the science, but he's also very well adjusted to anything that's popular that's out there. So he's not the typical, button down type guy. He is really kind of that rock star type person. Yes. And that's what makes him unique too. He's not nothing that you think.
Very approachable.
Yes.
And very willing to share knowledge and consider things and such. So, and this has been a tough week for the company. I'm sure he's been burning the midnight oil along with everybody else there.
I would imagine so.
So FDA issues this letter, and Answers dug their feet in and said, we're not going to cave like other companies might have chosen to do. We have negative tests on our product. This is not, we need to test further before we do anything. There are no reports of illnesses, sicknesses, stubbed toes associated with this. And, the contradictory tests really bother me. So it's been tested by independent labs, and it's been tested by the state of Nebraska. It has not been tested by the FDA. But yet the FDA is saying, don't feed this. Mm-hmm. Doesn't quite make sense to me. The real kicker that for me, when the whole press release came out, was they couldn't even get the best by date.
Yes.
The use by date. They wrote it in European format. So the food was, I guess, manufactured in December. But if you read the date as they've written it, the date it was best by was August 20th, 4 months before it was even made. Mm-hmm. If that's your attention to detail, I don't want you making choices about my safe food if you can't get a date right. That's just absurd.
I loved in their press release. I did actually, that was the first thing I was looking at it right now, and I was thinking, I love that Answers came out with that. Look, this is the first thing that we're going to topic on. That alone just shows that, okay, there's something. But going back to what the FDA said, I felt that they were giving a blindsided opinion, a very one-sided, their opinion only, not fact, not science, their opinion. And I felt like that was so inappropriate and so unprofessional.
Yes.
I was shocked.
Yes, the entire tone of the initial release was, this is dangerous, throw it out.
Yes.
And they're talking about, a positive result on one random test. Mm-hmm. And we're also talking about a positive result that were it on a whole chicken in your supermarket would be acceptable. Mm-hmm. So the double standard is absurd.
Now,
absolutely absurd.
That's something that really has been really kicking in my head for the last couple of days. And maybe you can shed some light on this. Mm-hmm. So the FDA regulates pet food. How, obviously majority of it, if it's not raw, it's feed.
Correct.
But yet the USDA regulates human grade. Now, this is where I'm having such a problem with it. So when you look at raw feeding and you look at these companies that whether it's cooked, semi-cooked, or raw, but they're using human grade type meat, why is it that the FDA is looking in on this and not the USDA?
Well, because the FDA requires that pet food be sterile, meaning no bacteria. The USDA does not have that requirement. But as soon as you take 2 USDA inspected and passed meat products, let's say you take chicken and turkey, and you mix them together to make a pet food, you're now under FDA's jurisdiction because it's pet food. And because it's a mixed product, and because it's pet food, it has to be sterile.
And yet, when you look at kibble, let's just go right to the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Huge amounts of salmonella
huge numbers of recalls.
Right, or at least should be.
Yeah. And we have it culturing positive for salmonella, for listeria, for other bacteria. And when you think about how the kibble is packaged, how it's handled, shipped on pallets, even if it were sterile when it went in the bag, the possibility that it could be punctured and bacteria could get in there certainly exists. Mm-hmm. And we know that as soon as air is exposed, or that kibble's fat coating is exposed to air, the fats start becoming rancid. Mm-hmm. So, that food is decomposing in the bag if there's air in there, and if there's a hole for bacteria. If we're talking about canned food, have you ever experienced a can of food that got a puncture and Clostridium grew in it?
God, no.
Oh my gosh, the smell is just horrific. And of course, that's certainly potentially health impacting. It happens in human canned foods as well. You'll open it and you'll find a layer of black slime and this awful smell. Because again, it was sterile when it went in the can and got sealed, but when there was a puncture, no longer sterile. And bacteria just take over.
Well, that brings up an interesting point. Maybe something that I'm pretty sure you've been versed to this as well, but with big box stores, if they have dog or cat food that's punctured, they're supposed to just send it back to distribution, and a lot of times they just donate it to a local nonprofit.
Yes, but we used to get a lot at the shelter I worked at.
Yeah, but here's the thing that I found really interesting. I've noticed a local Walmart that are just putting clearance tags on those, and they're still selling them with punctures.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's legal.
As far as I don't know.
That's a Susan question. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it was one of those, ponder this as something, or even whenever anybody goes to their local stores, see if you find a punctured hole in a bag and see if they've discounted the bag. Because it's a weird thought.
I've seen it, my grocery store often has marked down stuff.
Yeah.
And they'll put clear tape over a broken package of pasta and sell it.
Yeah.
Like, all right, well, we're going to cook it, but still, would you want, to buy that when you knew it was open to whatever?
Not even a chance.
I don't think I would.
Nope.
Not a chance.
So here's the next thing that I find really strange. So obviously the big topic is obviously salmonella, because like we keep saying, that's the real ghost here, the one that they're trying to scare everybody with. So foods that are associated with salmonella outbreaks in humans, I find this to be very interesting. The 29% out of this pie chart, can you guess which the 29% highest amount is, which is the highest in this group? What would you think?
I would bet it's vegetables.
It's a very good...
Vegetables like packaged salads. I remember a tomato recall for Listeria a while back.
Yep. They're actually saying poultry. Poultry is 28%. Yeah, it's strange by that.
It makes sense. We know there's salmonella in poultry.
Right.
But I can't think of the last poultry recall I've heard of.
The last one was Jennie-O ground turkey, which happened within the last month. And that was the last one. And that's, look, that's possible. It's going to happen. Now, when you had mentioned...
Gosh, and as soon as you grind meat,
yes,
you're handling it, you're exposing it to everything.
Oh, everything.
But then there was the romaine lettuce thing around Thanksgiving.
And you're saying vine vegetables, fruits, and nuts, that made up only 13%, according to this pie chart. I thought that was strange and a little bit, a little bit different. They said 20% for other, and that could be sprouts, leafy greens, roots, fish, grains, beans, shellfish, oil, sugar, and dairy were 20%. Sure. Okay, I can get there. But
that's
now
a huge category.
It is, I know, and to be only 20% wasn't bad. Now, these are things that everybody is probably using at home that are touching and dealing with. The next, which I'm gonna ask you what you think the percentage is, but what would you say the one thing that we're really talking about, and that's beef? What do you think the percentage is on that?
I'm guessing it's under 10.
Yes.
Are you going to make me go further?
Yeah.
5.
Very good. It's good guess. It's 8%. So you're really close. Okay. I would have said 15 to 20. That would have been my guess.
No.
So I was really surprised. I was like, beef. Okay. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Now, eggs shocked me. There's things about eggs that I didn't even realize, and that's another story in itself. But eggs wasn't that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm joking. It was 18%.
Okay.
So that's, that sounds about reasonable. And then pork was higher than beef at 12%, and I get that. So that's kind of a breakdown.
Well, potentially more dirt exposure and stuff than the cow.
Right.
Although, depending on where you're sourcing.
That's it. And that's
factory farms are free range.
And, that goes back to another story we had, a conversation, I should say, of I wish we could actually pick our factory farms or at least know where it's coming from, because then we would be a little bit more cautious, where now it's blind. But these are things that we're dealing with on a day-to-day. Not talking about pet food. We're talking about our own food.
Human food. Right.
And yet, this is something that we're, freaking out that they're saying, oh, raw pet food, if you touch it, you will have salmonella issues and you could end up sick or worse. I'm thinking, really? That's what really catches me to this. Like, what a lie.
Exactly. That is crazy because, everything from Pepperidge Farm goldfish to romaine lettuce to, your chicken roaster and ground turkey potentially is contaminated. And we all seem to still be here. So to me, that points out, do the common sense things. Wash your hands, wash your utensils. Don't be stupid and, put stuff in your mouth that doesn't belong there.
Like the Tide Pods?
Like the Tide Pods, it just seems like a common sense thing, and to get all worked up that there's bacteria in a product such as Answers, and we haven't even touched upon their fermentation and helpful bacteria technology that keeps the bad bacteria populations in check, even when they put their products at room temperature. That is an elegant way to prevent spoilage.
And see
what they've done here.
See, that's why I wanted to give the facts of here's things that we're all touching, whether we're kibble feeders or we're raw feeders. Here's something that we're touching constantly, and yet we're not having a problem. So that's why I wanted to be able to show people, all right, we can squash this myth, kind of like Mythbusters in a sense, where we can squash this really easy. And it's down to that. So, obviously, like you said, fermentation with Answers. Best of all, and we were talking about before we started, better than anyone how that whole process works, because, of course, Billy has talked to you, and he's brilliant. So,
explained it.
If you could break that down for us so that we can understand just how their fermentation process works and what it does. What's the benefit?
Yeah. The benefit is in the bacteria, as I understand it. They use this fermentation process and put in bunch of desirable bacteria that can outcompete the bad bacteria, let's say the Salmonella. So it's, there's a certain amount of food that the bacteria can live on in a food product. Mm-hmm. And if the Salmonella are getting outcompeted, that population is not going to grow, and it may even decrease. And the good bacteria that we need, like what we call probiotics, things that benefit us in the intestinal digestive tract of the dog, are the things that are outcompeting them. Does that make sense?
It does.
So we don't destroy the good bacteria, we actually nourish them, and we let the good bacteria kill the bad ones. Mm-hmm. That's it in the simplest nutshell that I can come up with. But it's such an elegant way of looking at it, because what do other food companies say? How can we just kill everything? Let's pasteurize it, let's cook it, let's high pressure pasteurize it, which does kill bacteria, but it kills the good as well as the bad. And it also can change the quality of the proteins, damaging the strands of amino acids that make up those proteins. So this is a benign process when it comes to the food, and a really smart one when it comes to the bacteria.
Now, here's the other part that always gets me, is that they use the word Salmonella for everything when it comes to this. Now, I'm going to sound just like what they want the typical pet parent to say. Well, I don't want to feed my dog any Salmonella or anything that contains Salmonella, so I need to avoid it.
You already have, so relax. You've already eaten Salmonella yourself, because it's out there.
It is.
You can't help but avoid it. But the thing is, the immune system is powerful, the digestive tract is powerful, the dog's stomach acid destroys bacteria very effectively. And so you don't have to worry about it unless you're like doing stupid things like eating rotten meat that's loaded, or not washing your hands after you handle fresh meats, whether they be for your plate or your dog's bowl. It's just, it's not a problem.
But the thing is that dogs and cats, their whole digestive system is built to withstand this. I mean, I'm not saying pump them with a ton of, high percent of it. Obviously not. Right.
But think of the wolf, the coyote, the tiger, the lion. They all eat prey. They all, to some extent, will scavenge from an old kill. If these bacteria, whether it be Salmonella, Listeria, or others, were so deadly, these populations of wild animals would not exist.
Right. They would die of all of the diseases that they ingested, and it would just absolutely be crazy. I mean, it would literally wipe them off the planet, in a sense. They would wipe themselves off.
Correct.
But they're built for this. They are made to handle all these things, which is what, always gets my attention is, why are you using these scare tactics for different disease, different illnesses that won't affect the dog or cat? It shocks me when it comes to this. That's the first thing I said is Salmonella. I mean, it was just like, that's what they're going to go with? I mean, seriously? It just it didn't work. It didn't work. Make itself work. And I think that a lot of people are petrified of it. But the thing is, and this is another piece of statistic, is people die of the flu more often than they will of Salmonella. By a lot. That's something. Even a flu shot can kill you.
Well, let's put this in perspective. Over a 10-year average, this is data from 2014. 737 Americans died falling out of bed.
Wow.
Yeah, 737. 264 from being hit by a bus. 69 by lawnmowers. 21 by armed toddlers.
Armed toddlers, as in like Maggie Simpson hitting Homer with a mallet.
I'm assuming that means kids who got a hold of guns and accidentally shot somebody. But, when you think about it, all Islamic jihadist terrorists, excluding 9/11, 9 Americans.
Yep.
Being shot by another American, 11,737. So your odds of being shot by another American are much, much higher than of getting salmonella and dying from it.
And that's why I find this to be so bizarre. Because
exactly.
it's
but people are easily made afraid of this.
Right.
Salmonella, oh my God, it's, the CDC is mentioned in the press release and other health departments and very official sounding things. So of course we should be afraid of it.
Which drives me nuts. Now that brought me back to something that we were talking about before, where I had given you a statistic on 2018, the salmonella rate in the United States as of 2018 by state, new cases per 100,000 population. And I thought that this was such a well-rounded. Now, we're not talking about exposed to anything that was dog food or cat food related. No. We're just talking about salmonella. And in general. So it's, I picked up eggs or chicken or whatever the case was. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And it was shocking. Where I told you, we went over the list, and I said, Mississippi being the number one at 39.8.
Yep.
That is, that's high. And then, you want to, we could all say, oh, well, you can make all kinds of claims. Well, this, that, whatever. It's not as cosmopolitan as other places. Yeah, but,
poorer people, but that's 18 times fewer than the people who died falling out of bed.
True. And then number 6.
We all manage to go to bed at night.
We do. Number 6 on this list, right? Number 6 is Florida. Now, that's 27.2.
Okay.
So, you have a lot of cosmopolitan parts of Florida. So
and maybe it has to do with the climate. That
True.
The organism lives more effectively. You've talked about 2 states that have water there and warm temperatures most of the time. Compared to northern states.
True. Well,
but still, it's not a lot.
It's not.
It's not a lot of people. What we don't know is, were those people immunocompromised, have other health challenges? We don't know the circumstances.
Right.
So it's strictly a number. But given that less than 5% of the population feeds their dog raw food, I doubt that they were a large number of them fed raw.
And I doubt that any of this had anything to do with a DIY or any kind of raw feeding. This was all handling some kind of poultry, most likely, because we already went over the numbers, or even down to just eggs. So, but hey, folks, don't eat. I mean, that's kind of what this is in a sense saying. Don't eat because you could have salmonella.
You could get a disease.
Right. It's absolutely baffling that we're using one term that can be exposed for anything. Yeah, I just learned something very strange, and again, this, I'm 100% sure, but I found out that by not washing eggs, if you have somebody who brings you fresh eggs, don't wash them. The fecal matter and that layer that's on it is, in a sense, kind of like a fermentation, where it will hold.
Protective.
Yes. I didn't know that.
There are, two of my vet techs actually have their own chickens, and I buy my eggs from them. Mm-hmm. And they are cleaned with just a sponge and water, just lightly. And I'm told some farmers markets they call it the dirty dozen, but they will sell you unclean eggs. And if that's what you want, you got it.
They last, I was told, up to 6 months?
Yes. We're one of the few countries that refrigerates eggs. Right. In Europe, eggs and butter are at room temperature, and they're stable. And the other thing for the raw feeders who may be listening, whatever you do, do not feed the shells of grocery store eggs because they are chemically cleaned. And in addition to using that as a calcium source, you're putting in those chemical cleaners in your dog's meal. Now, I don't hesitate to feed my technician's eggs shells to my dogs because I know the most they've been exposed to is water.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever have the chance to get your hands on true free-range eggs, they're a totally different species than grocery store eggs.
Oh, completely.
The shell is different. The yolk is different. The white is thicker. They taste like eggs. They don't taste like nothingness.
Nothingness. That's a good point. Yeah.
It's hugely different.
So now that we've kind of broken down salmonella in a sense,
right?
And we found out, okay, this is not a real recall, but yet, let's be honest, it's kind of like when you watch any kind of law shows and the defense attorney will say something and then there's an objection and
the jury will disregard that.
Yeah.
Well, you can't.
You can't. It's out there.
And I'm sure that's part of the reason why this was done.
Exactly.
Because, and as in the Answers press release, in reply to this, they provided all their information and testing and independent expert opinion, and without further consultation with the parent company, Lystn, FDA issued this warning letter.
Mm-hmm. Which
tells you what their agenda is to alarm people about raw food, not to follow their own laws and process.
But you know what? I liked how they did a CYA. They did a wonderful CYA where they said, oh, we have other companies that are dry kibble that also have, strands of salmonella.
Sure.
And I thought that was kind of funny because I was like, wait a second. Now, actually, it was a vitamin D
Recently there have been vitamin D recalls for excesses of vitamin D in kibble.
Toxicity.
A number of brands manufactured by one packer.
Mm-hmm.
There have been certainly a number of salmonella and listeria cases in kibble. And I think one person got sick.
And it's funny because all of a sudden, okay, well, we're going to throw this out there. And then all of us just randomly, we're just going to decide to shoot this off as well. All at the same time, which I thought was coincidence. And yet at the same time, it was definitely questionable. So you had to say to yourself, all right, so you didn't hit any of the big companies. You hit little tiny little things that, is really anybody going to pay attention to? Probably not. Do people really?
How many people feed those brands?
That's it.
The kibble brands that are currently, being recalled.
It just seemed a little odd. Like, well, that's not the people that are really doing this. They're not the ones that are constantly the ones that are victimizing the consumers. So it felt to me like they were trying to cover themselves by just saying, "Oh, well, we did cover some."
By saying, "Oh, well, we're neutral."
Right.
But a lot of the brands in the most recent vitamin D, Evolve is popular here in the Northeast. Kroger is popular in certain parts of the country.
Right.
A&F is a kind of a niche food. Natural Life used to be popular. Nutrisca we have a lot of up here. But all these foods were made by a company called Sunshine Mills.
Mm-hmm.
They package it. Oh, and Triumph is popular in certain little segments. But this is not a Nutro. This is not a Mars product.
Mm-mm.
This is not a Hills or a Purina. So yes, fortunately, because it's going to affect fewer dogs. But
they're not.
Then to put these brands in the same league as Answers and some of the other raw companies that are out there. I mean, the quality of ingredients, the care and processing just is totally different. And of course, none of these kibbles contain human quality ingredients.
No, well, they did at one point. They did.
Perhaps.
It was broken down, and they took everything that was wanted.
I see where you're going. Yeah, yeah,
of course.
Yeah, and then yeah.
It's all,
and that's it's all kibble.
Yeah, it's misdirection too. It's we put the proteins in that are human grade. No, the parts that are human grade are no longer available. That's all been taken away and sold and inspected by the USDA.
Right.
So
and I'm glad you brought that up, because that draws an interesting parallel to the use of the term raw by the kibble companies.
Right.
We have dehydrated raw, we have raw infused, we have raw coated. Yes, it is true that those ingredients once upon a time were raw. But once you've cooked them, dried them, processed them, they are no longer raw. And you're just using that word to try to latch on to raw feeding, which alternately FDA is trying to bury.
Right.
It's kind of ironic.
You
want the appeal of raw, but you don't want there to be raw.
Yeah, I don't understand that. How can you want one but not the other?
Well, and how can you deliberately try to deceive consumers? And how are consumers so foolish to think, oh yeah, I've got the whatever brand it is with the raw boost, the little they're not kibbles, but little chunks of raw chicken. It's like, it's not raw. It's dehydrated. It's been cooked at 165 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
It no longer has the benefits that a truly raw piece of meat holds for a carnivore.
Well, it goes down to, you've gone down out of fun. I've done it many a times, where you go down the pet food aisle at your big box store, and you see these clear containers that have what they're saying is, in a sense, raw, but it's got your peas, it has your carrots, it has some kind of meat, it's floating in some kind of juice or gravy type substance that is loaded in sodium. And you're thinking, oh, well, as the consumer, oh, well, look at this. This is something that I would have. It's like a pot pie in a sense.
The little containers, they look like Tupperware containers of, let's say chicken stew. And you look in it, and visually, it looks like it could be a chicken pot pie or stew.
Yeah.
Oh, it looks delicious. It looks appealing. Your dog doesn't judge his or her food by visual appearance. That's us and the chefs. But beyond that meat that you think looks so good is probably formed meat. It's not like shredded chicken. It's been molded into that shape because it's made with scraps of meat and such. And those carrots and peas are not that, they probably did not pass human inspection. So that's why they were available for dog food. And the cost of those things is horrific.
Right? I know. I've seen that. I'm like, a banquet pot pie at like 80 cents or something like that has more nutritional value than that $1.50, $2, whatever concoction that they're throwing out there. Not saying neither one are good, but one's better than the other.
And actually, sometimes I go to the grocery store and take pictures of this stuff for my education and my talks. I thought I shot some pictures of some of those, but I guess I didn't. But here's the variety pack. Here's something, $3.81 a pound on sale. A grain-free stew-like food, $5.71 a pound regular price. So that's ridiculous.
Now
$5.71 a pound.
The FDA tests these as well, I would assume. And how did they not come up?
I would assume at some point they do.
I would think so. And then the question is, how do they not come up with higher levels of salmonella than what we're talking about? What Answers is putting out there? That's the huge question.
I think because it's cooked to death.
That's how they
And
get by it.
unless there's loss of integrity of the packaging and such, it will stay sterile. But again, cooking from the dog's point of view, and even from the human in some foods, does decrease digestibility or nutrient value, I'll say. I don't know what exactly is the right term, but the true nutrition that you're going to derive from that is often better from the food in its natural state than in its processed state.
And here's another factor that I find to be very funny, and you're going to laugh because you're going to be like, yes. Mm-hmm. But when you're feeding this sugar-based crap kibble, you have tooth decay and all kinds of issues. Where when you're actually feeding raw food, the bones are providing even like a toothbrush within. So you're missing all of the sodium that shouldn't be there. You're missing all of the sugar that has no business being there.
All the carbohydrates or starches, yes.
Exactly. And your dog has a healthy smile. All these. That's why people will say, my dog's teeth are really yellow or really they have a lot of problems. What would you suggest? Well, it's very simple. Get off the kibble. That's what it is. It's like...
it was interesting. I was reading something, veterinary continuing education type article. And this veterinarian, I believe he was a dental specialist or a vet with a special interest in dentistry. And he advocated for a toy breed dog to have their first dental by the age of 3, and then yearly thereafter, in order to preserve that dog's teeth for the longest amount of time, because toy breed dogs are notorious for poor dentition. Now, just a dental cleaning, anesthesia, the whole 9 yards at my practice, starts around $500. Mm-hmm. So, let's say you have your Chihuahua, and at age 3, you spend your first $500. And let's say he's a long-lived Chihuahua, and he lives till 15. There's 12 cleanings at $500. That's $6,000, and that's 12 times under anesthesia if you do it once a year. And that's not accounting for price increases, which inflation is what it is. Right. That's absurd. Well, I have put one of my dogs. One time I counted how many Aussies I've lived with. I think it approaches 20 between the long-term residents and the ones who just spent some time at my house. I put one dog under anesthesia for a tooth problem, and that was actually my first Aussie, and he had cracked a tooth on a bone that I chose that was inappropriate for him. Right. And the tooth had to be pulled, but you know what? I didn't have to clean the other teeth. We just pulled the tooth and sutured the gum and moved on. Right. Whereas some of these dogs, the tartar, the bad breath, the pain and discomfort and infection the dogs suffer because they're eating kibble diets is just horrendous. Right. And, of course, then you have obesity, you have a great deal of strain on the heart, and putting a dog under anesthesia at a later age is very dangerous. Correct. Can be. It's the Chihuahuas, it's the Poodles. The Poodles have a terrible time. The Bichons, what else do we see a lot of? Some of the crosses, the Min Pin crosses and such. But, they're dogs typically 20 pounds and under, I would say. Well, 20 pounds and 20 pounds, and I'm not saying all of them, but 20 pounds of poor diet. I mean, come on. Right. I mean, maybe they should be 15 pounds, but yeah. But even at that, I mean, you're still. I know in conversations we talked about the progression of age of 3 years on a poor diet is magnified by 2 to 3 times that. So it's a shortened time, and that's what I'm even thinking. Wow, 3 years and have its first dental. I mean, it seems like a long time, and yet at the same time, it's like, wow, that seems like a early time. It has that mix. Like, for example... For me, it's very early. Yeah. And, my dog who cracked his tooth, he was over 10 at the time he cracked his tooth. Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, you think
3 is early, but then again, it goes back to, is 3 early or is 3, 3 is now the new 9.
What's the mileage on those 3 years?
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. It's like, well, 3 years is, no big deal. Oh, but if it's on a poor diet, that's about 6 to 9 years. Human, 9 years. It's, and again, the easy way to summarize that is think of it in terms of drug use or alcohol abuse, where it just wears the body down and everything just starts to drop. Well, that's the same thing here. So we've covered the salmonella. We've debunked this witch hunt.
Yeah, there is no recall.
Right.
And
alleged.
If I had the alleged recall, if I had a package of this food, this beef straight formula, I would not hesitate to feed it to my dog.
I would not.
I would not hesitate to handle it. I'd wash my hands. End of story.
Well, that's a topic right there of we've had this conversation. I know, obviously, volume 8, you're going to have a lot of them, but down to if you feed your dog raw, you are lining yourself up for having salmonella. And I've said the same thing. At the time, even at 9 years old, my 9-year-old could put together multiple dog bowls with no issue and never once had any kind of salmonella issue.
No. Yeah.
9.
Well, and, as you know, I do occasionally breed a litter of Aussies. And one of my rules is I will only put those puppies in homes that are willing to raw feed.
Right.
And, not to blow my own horn, but my dogs are pretty nice. And they come with a unique heritage that appeals to many people. And people get very upset when I say, no, I will not put a dog in your hands.
Right.
Unless you are willing to make this change. And I have one family that is desperate. They want a nice dog to run in agility. But she has a child. She's like, I can't feed raw, I have a child. I'm like, well, you can. It's not hard. I will help you. Because she's semi-local to me. And if you don't, you can't have a puppy.
Right.
And, it's hard to look somebody in the eye and say that, but that is how strongly I believe in this. And that if I'm bringing a dog into this world through a choice that I made to do a breeding, I'm going to make sure that dog has the best life I know how to provide for it. And with each year, I learn more and improve, hopefully, what I do for my dogs. But I can't let something that essentially I was part of the creation of go where it's not going to have the best of the best.
And it's funny when you tell somebody that whether it's straight adoption or fee that's obviously involved.
My dogs are sold, I'll be honest, and they are not cheap because they are not many.
Right. Well, I mean, through our nonprofit, we put a price on it, and which helps the nonprofit, obviously.
Well,
but it also
good
weighs.
Point. Even an adoption, there is a fee to cover the cost, and for the adoption, the cost might be the rehabilitation of that dog, spaying and neutering. For me, it's the cost of genetic testing, of starting the litter off right, testing of the parents, testing of the grandparents, all those sorts of things. So we all cover costs. We certainly, neither of us run at a profit.
Right.
In placing dogs.
And you think
and that's not why I do it.
Well, no. But you think about it, if you go to a shelter, it costs money. If you go to a nonprofit, it costs money. There has to be some kind of cost. And another part of that really should be addressed is if you give them away for free, the wrong people are going to come over and take those dogs and do terrible, terrible things. So
or even through their lack of knowledge, just not do the best. And,
right.
It's one way you can select for the people who will take care of the dog as you would. And, of course, the other thing, and most adoption situations are like this too, if the dog does not work out, I'm your first phone call.
Exactly.
You call me, that dog comes back to me, no questions asked, and I will do whatever is necessary to make sure the dog has a great life.
We've done the same thing with any kind of dog or cat that's adopted out. If you can't keep the dog or cat, you let us know, And it's same thing, no questions asked. Well, we've even given people their adoption fee back just so that they don't feel like they were taken for a ride. It's not about the money, it's about finding the right home. So
when we've accepted responsibility for the individual dog in question, we're going to hold up that end of it.
Right.
And that's,
exactly.
And part of that is why I have an inherited dog who came to me at age, 10, 11. And why I had a slight disagreement with one of my puppy buyers who has provided a wonderful life for the dog, but in my contract it says that. And she's like, well, I don't want to agree to that. Why would I do this? What is the purpose of this? And I said, what if, God forbid, you were in a car accident, something happened to you, your dog is taken care of, you don't have to worry about that. And she was like, oh, okay, yeah, I want this. Or, God forbid you passed away or something. Dogs have come back because of divorces. Crazy things happen.
Oh, yeah. Well,
but the dog always has a safety net.
And see, that's what makes sense. I mean, there are, and again, let's even expand on that topic, where there are a lot of nonprofits or rescues out there that have the very same contract. I can look back, I think it was a year or two ago, the most popular one was Anna Faris and Chris Pratt at the time when they were still married. One of their dogs was loose, did get loose. And the nonprofit or rescue, whatever it was, found out and took the dog back, and they violated their contract and lost that dog because it was part of the contract. Take care of the dog a specific way, where that's how it should be. It should be like adopting a child in a sense.
Yeah. And so in some ways, it's easier to adopt a child.
It sadly is. I mean, that's the sad part. We actually put... and I understand why we put such high regards over humans, over a pet, but still, should we not, at least not treat them like an ottoman or, something simple that we can just buy at a local store? And that's
well, and certainly no pet store has this clause in their sales contract.
No.
That if it doesn't work out, it must return to us.
Luckily, though, in California, though, they have now passed a law that no pet store can...
I love that.
Right?
I love that.
I thought that was a wonderful law to be put into place.
I hope that spreads. Because
it will.
In California, it's such a populous state that I think it has a chance.
Well,
because...
It's a spot that always does.
Those dogs are not bred the way they should be. There's no health testing. There's no mentorship if the owner needs it. All the things that buying from a good breeder gets you.
And the backyard breeders they corrupt the whole thing. Living in a spot.
Well, and a lot of times they just don't know.
Right.
But
don't know, want the money over anything. I mean, it all works the same.
Right. Think they can make money breeding dogs, which generally is the opposite.
Yeah, well, it's true.
But
so we of course.
We digress. Yes.
Well, it's probably me. I'm sure I was the one who led us down the stray path, which I do so well. The takeaway that we should have for everybody who is saying, all right, well, so I have nothing to worry about, and the answer is no, you don't.
You don't. Well, actually, you have to worry about the FDA because clearly they can't get it right. That's what you got to worry about. And they can't even get the date right.
What drives me nuts with the FDA on a back to them, putting them on a spotlight. I have reached out to them. They will not talk. And I find it to be so funny. You're a government organization that's funded by tax dollars. And you don't have to answer to anybody. Yeah. Bizarre. It
is.
It's like, wait a second. You don't have to answer for anything. You can put anything out there. And in this case, really was libel. And yet, I don't think Answers has a chance to sue them because they're doing their job.
Well, but where the lawsuits are going to come in is in New Jersey. Let's touch briefly before we end, if that's all right, on the raw milk situation in New Jersey.
Okay.
So raw milk for human consumption is not legal in New Jersey. Okay. The New Jersey Health Department takes it upon itself to go to stores that happen to be selling raw goat's milk from Answers and potentially other companies for pets. And they were confiscating and destroying the product. Now, the health department has no jurisdiction over animal feed. No jurisdiction whatsoever. And my friend Gregory Lucas of Lucas and Berube started putting this out. I saw it. I immediately called Susan Thixton and said, Susan, you got to talk to Greg because there's something going on and it doesn't sound right. So she, of course, got to the bottom of it. And, you know, it's FDA who has jurisdiction over pet feed. And the New Jersey Department of Health does not understand the difference between animal feed and human food. So right now, the Next Generation Pet Food Association, which is an association of raw feeding companies, is working on this. But it potentially gives us grounds to sue the state of New Jersey for taking people's products illegally and destroying them.
Wow.
And not following, you know, they're out of their jurisdiction. And also helping people understand. And if they want to regulate pet feed as food, then they've got to go into every other pet store and remove all the kibble because it's all adulterated. It's all been rendered. If it contains a meat meal, if it contains non-human quality ingredients or animals that died by means other than slaughter, it is not food.
Huh.
Would you want to be the Department of Health that goes in there to PetSmart and says, we're confiscating all your food?
No.
Oh, my God. I mean, they opened a huge can of worms. And once again, Poor Answers is kind of at the center of it because they have one of the first raw goat's milk formulas out there. And it is a fermented product, and it does have the bacterial populations that keep the bad bacteria in check. But it has just been an amazing thing. And that happened, I want to say Wednesday. So it's been a heck of a week in the raw pet food arena.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's why when this whole thing started, it started like I said at the beginning of this on Monday. We immediately were saying, okay, well, we got to do something.
Yeah.
Dr. Coger was saying, okay, well, let's see, before anything, see if these people are available. I checked.
Right.
Everybody's really busy because there's a lot going on. So she's like, okay, the last option, I'll come in. I'm like, well, that works perfect. I mean,
I'll fill you in,
I'll totally fill it. It was brilliant because it was like, okay, well, you were never my last choice to anything. I follow everything that she says.
Yeah, but you know, these company owners are the experts in their company.
Right.
They're the ones you want to talk to when the dust is settled and they've had time to rest. And as I understand it with my quick research, there are still 8 states in the United States where you can't sell raw milk for human consumption. But nowhere does it say you can't sell raw milk for animal consumption. And the packages have to be, you know, stamped animal consumption only, not for human, or words to that effect.
I'm trying to recall in my brain here when I had Billy on last. I think he was saying that they can't be the color white in certain places. They had to put this coloring in.
You know what? That does sound familiar, so that you could distinguish there that this was not regular milk.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time I poured, the last time I poured some Answers out, it's a yellowish, creamy color.
Yeah.
And there's chunks of fermented, I don't know, stuff in it.
Stuff,
but there's little chunks. Yeah. And that's where the good bacteria are, as I understand it.
And for anybody who wants to know more on the Answer side, you can easily go back in our episodes and look up Billy Hookman because his episode's up there.
Yeah.
And you can research through that one. And that's a good cross
as well as going to the Answers The Answers website and Facebook page
Yes.
have videos from them where he explains this, in perfectly accurate detail. I'm a hack compared to Billy when it comes to this stuff.
Are you kidding? You understand the science way more than I do. So I'm the one that's completely going,
he's Answers is the expert on fermentation and feeding it to your dog. Or cat for that matter.
They have it down. I mean, and I mean this in no pun, but they have it down to a science.
Yeah.
They're very good at this, and they've been doing it for a long time. That's what really has all of us scratching our head going, so much has happened.
Because it was funny today. I've been doing a lot of computer work, but Facebook was open, and a video that Cole Harrington from Pet Fool did came up on the Sparkle dog food.
Uh-huh.
Do you recall Sparkle?
I do. I remember us talking about it literally.
At one end of the spectrum, you've got Answers with their science, their fermentation process, their mastery over the bacteria. You've got the full spectrum of kibble manufacturers. And then you have one of the Real Housewives of I forget which town. And she decided she wanted to sell a dog food. And it would be called Sparkle because there were sparkles in it. And there would be pink bits in it. And someone asked her in this video clip, well, why would you make it pink when the dogs can't see that? And she said, well, women buy most of the dog food and women like pink. Now, there's a rationale for choosing how to nourish your pet. I like pink. And the dogs were pooping pink, too, which was what was really funny.
Oh, that
I don't think it's still on the market. Yeah, and sparkly. Because all those dyes and those sparkles are not digestible. Mm-mm. So they just come out.
I vaguely remember that conversation.
Like the antithesis. Yeah. The antithesis of thoughtful dog food creation.
Did we actually say that the dogs will fart sparkles? Or was that somebody else? I think that's what it was. Because I remember we were sitting down. It's probably volume 5 out of this, somewhere around that mark. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Hey, have you seen this?" And you said, "I just saw it." And we went to town over it because, come on. I mean, for one, to say all women like pink is just the worst. Because I know a lot of girls who do not like pink. A lot of women who are like, I don't like pink. So to say all women like pink and all girls like pink is terrible. To add sparkles, I mean,
Oh, Sparkle, you'll be thrilled to know Sparkle is still available on Amazon.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised either. But, and I guess in some ways it's no different in marketing than those stews we were talking about that do look appealing because they look like there's something that we would eat.
Right. When are we going to learn to stop feeding our animals what we think are good and instead just feed them what's biologically appropriate?
Well, that's what our little group of warriors are doing. We're spreading that information. Obviously, Dr. Karen Becker and Rodney Habib are the leaders of that movement when it comes to reaching dog owners, pet parents, whatever you want to call, guardians, and getting the information in their hands in a form that they can use. Because as you said, not everybody's going to understand all the heavy-duty science.
Right.
And some folks, it's just not their interest. They're busy. They've got other stuff going on. They just want to know what's the right thing to do.
Right. And that's
so.
Have you had people come to you in the last few days and say, "What's your opinion on this?"
No, but I've been so busy on the phone with the powers that be. They probably couldn't have gotten through.
I've had people ask, "What's your opinion?" And it's like, for one, I feel like I shouldn't have an opinion. I just want to give facts and let people decide. I don't want to be the FDA on this and give my opinion and sway.
Well, yes, you want to give facts or substantiate your opinion with facts.
Yes.
And I used to be very much like because people always ask me, well, what would you do if it was your dog? I used to not want to answer that question, and I've changed my thinking on that. Now it's like, well, if it were my dog, I would do this because A, B, and C.
Right.
And I think I was shortchanging people when I didn't give my opinion, when I just gave them facts, because the question they were asking was really, what should I do?
Right.
And they were searching for a simple, achievable answer. And instead, I was making them jump through hoops. So mull that over. I really think it's worth saying, look, if you were my dog, I would feed this.
Right.
And if you want help, I will help you.
Good point. Very good point. I'll definitely think twice about saying, well, I don't think I should have an opinion. I guess in the sense I should really be a little bit more understanding of people are looking.
Well, and you're now in the position where you've talked to enough of us experts, and you've gleaned a lot of knowledge. So your opinion certainly has merit. And, you talk to a lot of people about their dogs.
Right.
And that's where, information, and even that's the inspiration for research. I've been hearing this time and time again. Well, now let's look deeper. Now let's set up, a study. Let's gather some data so we can really move things forward.
And we all know that the science is there and it's proven. It's not a small sample size. There's enough science here to really substantiate the claims that raw is actually the way to go. So I think it's
and the traditional veterinary medicine, and certainly the folks at Tufts and other folks are going to argue from their corner.
Right.
You pick your expert and follow them. You do your research and go with what resonates with you. Whatever works for you.
And what's also good is that this was done literally practically live to the release date. I mean, it's done the day before the release. And so everything that we're talking about literally just happened. So it's fresh. So everybody who's listening, you have an idea of what it is. You don't have to worry. Well, this is an episode about, dog fur shoelaces instead of talking about what we should be talking about. This is it. It's, take the statistics into consideration. I'm afraid of sleeping now in a bed. That's a little frightening. But, we're exposed to this all the time. They're scaring us. They're trying to scare all of you into thinking that what you're doing is wrong. Follow the path that we're telling you to follow, which isn't the right path. And here's the statistics, take it, think about it. Obviously, like you said, it's a warning letter. It was a warning letter, not a recall, but they called it a recall, which is very upsetting. Very upsetting.
Well, they tried to force Answer's hand, and Answers, being the scientists that they are, said, no, we have enough contradictory proof that your opinion is not substantiated, that we're not recalling.
Right.
And it's important, and Susan would be a better person to explain the nuts and bolts, but most of the recalls you see, like even for the vitamin D, you'll see it was termed a voluntary recall, meaning FDA said, you have to recall this, and the company agreed.
Right.
They call that a voluntary recall.
Right.
There are some situations where a recall will be forced, but as I understand it, and again, check me, if patients are dying, then they're going to do a forced recall.
Right.
But nobody's died, nobody's gotten sick. One sample out of I don't know how many tested positive, and other samples in that particular lot did not test positive multiple times.
And we've heard it time and time again. I mean, honestly, it does bring you back to previous conversations down the way, which was Radcat. Look at what happened. There was questions on that. And I think that, I said it back then, who's next? And now we're at that point of seeing what they tried. Obviously, it was unsuccessful. But again, like I said, the jury stricken this from the record and ignore this. It's out there.
Yeah,
a lot of people will there.
And people will not take the time to read and look further. They'll say answers recall. And they're like, oh, well, I guess I won't be feeding that anymore.
Right. Terrible way of going too, because it's obviously it's a false claim. And I don't know how to break this down any easier for everybody. Billy was able to give you guys everything on that side from the science perspective. I felt like it was something we needed to do, and we needed to sit down and kind of bring this out and explain it in another way that they didn't have the time to do. So,
right.
And I know Billy will be on at some point once all the dust settles, and he'll come back and he'll be able to share the real insight of what went on from that perspective, and we'll go from there.
Because we're still, it's Friday, and this hit the fan on Monday.
Right.
Well, and remember, you have to come to my expo April 6th.
I want to.
Because Billy will be there. Maybe you could even record something live there with him or something.
I have to tell you a story about something similar to that after we get done.
Yeah?
Because
funny
story that I'll share with you. But at this point, is there anything that we should leave everybody with, or do we really cover it all? Because I think we did.
I think we've covered everything.
Okay, cool.
Most of all, rule number 1, don't panic. Don't panic.
Right.
Use common sense.
And the second thing, she's a doctor. I trust her. I only play one on a podcast. So, it's one thing if you don't listen to me, but I think it's a good idea. Listen to Dr. Coger.
Thank you.
Well, I'm Chris Green. Have a fantastic week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay, gotta go in my bedtime.